Hello everyone, my name is María González Pons. I'm an assistant investigator at the University of Puerto Rico Comprehensive Cancer Center, and today we're going to be talking about how to write a scientific manuscript. So, lots of people ask, what makes a good manuscript? Well, good data tells a story. A title conveys focus of the study and attracts the reader. The abstract is a self-contained summary of the content of the paper. The introduction provides just the necessary background and states the gap in knowledge. The materials and methods provide experimental details. The results describe the findings and shows the analyzed data in an understandable way. And the discussion discusses what the results mean in the context of previous results. Sometimes the hardest part about writing a manuscript is actually starting to write it. Throughout this presentation, I will be giving you tips to begin this process, starting with the abstract and title. Both should generate interest and be specific and concise. The title is usually what draws the reader to your manuscript, and based on the abstract, they will decide if they will read the entire paper. Both the title and the abstract should be specific enough to describe the contents of the paper, highlighting innovation, relevance, and major findings. In general, there are three types of titles: indicative, informative, or questioning. For example, an indicative title would be Levels of Systemic Inflammatory Mediators Following Administration of Antibiotics in Patients with Colorectal Cancer. An informative title would be Azithromycin Induces High Level of TNF-alpha and IL-6 in Patients with Colorectal Cancer. A questioning title would be Do antibiotics increase cytokine levels in patients with colorectal cancer? Usually the last two formats should be used if findings are novel and or go against what's known in the field. So, how can you come up with a good, interesting, and informative title? First, go to the Instructions to Authors section in your target journal to verify if they have any specifications. I haven't mentioned this previously, but I will be repeating this throughout the presentation. It is very important for you to go to the Instructions for Authors to be sure to comply with the specifications of your target journal in all the sections we will be discussing. Second, write down 12 to 15 keywords that describe your study to generate possible titles. Try to limit the use of acronyms, but at the end of this exercise, you should have several titles that just by looking at the list, you have a general idea of what your study is about. Third, share with colleagues. At the end of this exercise, you should have a title that is informative and interesting to potential readers. Now, moving on to the abstract, this is the most important section of your manuscript. Based on the abstract, readers will decide whether to read the entire paper. The abstract should provide a succinct overview of your study. It should emphasize key results and significance, should be understandable to non-experts in the field, should be written in past tense, and should only include well-known acronyms. All abstracts have four main parts: the background, the methods, the results, and the conclusion. The background introduces a general topic while emphasizing the relevance of the study and describing the objective, clearly stating your hypothesis. The methods section briefly describes the general methods used, the results summarizes the key results, and the conclusion summarizes the significance and impact of the findings. There are two types of abstracts, a structured abstract and an unstructured abstract. The difference between the two is that the structured abstract has the different parts divided by subheadings. The journal you decide to submit your manuscript to in the Instructions to Authors section will describe the type of abstract they require. Sometimes these sections change depending on the journal, and also the word count is not universal across all journals. So definitely refer to Instructions to Authors. If not specified, verify abstracts in manuscripts recently published in that journal. When beginning to write an abstract, first check for journal requirements in the Instructions to Authors section, as I just mentioned. Second, write a draft of your abstract in a structured format regardless of the type of abstract required. This forces you to think logically about the key information you should provide the reader to know about what your study entails. Write approximately 2 sentences per section, and if unstructured, delete the headings and edit the wording so that the sentences flow. Third, Edit the wording as needed to comply with the required word count. Moving on to the introduction, this section should provide the reader with sufficient information to understand your study without referring to other manuscripts. It should provide the conceptual framework of your study while answering key questions. Why is this research important? What is the gap in knowledge? How did you address this gap in knowledge? And how does your research advance the field? When writing the introduction, usually write 3 to 8 paragraphs, although in more recent manuscripts you will observe shorter introductions ranging from 3 to 5 paragraphs. The introduction consists of 2 complementary components, the contextual orientation and the manuscript focus. The contextual orientation provides more general baseline information, such as epidemiology or a description of the disease, and then narrows it down to the topic of interest by stating the gap in knowledge and the significance of this knowledge in the field. In the manuscript focus, you describe an overview of your study by discussing your hypothesis and a brief overview of your strategy. But before you start writing, you should take into consideration whether you'll be submitting your work to a specialized or a general scientific journal. Introductions for general scientific journals will require that more basic general information be included so that their target readers, who are from diverse scientific backgrounds, will understand your work. Another thing you should consider is that what is the most important conclusion of your work. This will help you set the tone for your introduction. As a general recommendation, find an example of a manuscript you like. This will help you focus your introduction and begin to draft an outline of the important points you want to present to your reader. And remember, everything should be written in past tense. When writing the first paragraph of the introduction, the opening sentence should grab the reader's attention. It should serve as a hook, making them interested enough to read the rest of the introduction. Very general information should be avoided. Provide an overview of the disease or organism you're studying. Define the big picture. And also, consider who you're writing for, a specialized journal audience or a general scientific journal audience. When writing the second and third paragraph of the introduction, you should narrow down to the topic of your study by providing a status report of the current knowledge and clearly stating the gap in knowledge. You can use phrases such as are currently unclear, remain to be defined, are yet to be elucidated. Stating the gap in knowledge is the second more important factor considered when accepting a manuscript. Don't comprehensively review the literature. Just stick to the literature related to your work, and you may include your own work. Remember to emphasize why addressing this gap in knowledge is important. When writing the fourth and fifth paragraph of your introduction, describe the aim of your study and provide a general overview of the approach used. Clearly state your hypothesis, and try to finish the last paragraph of the introduction with a strong sentence, emphasizing how this study advanced the field by stating the overall findings but not going into details. After the introduction, the materials and methods section describes everything used and done to achieve the reported results. A description of all materials, relevant equipment, study subjects, models, procedures, and statistical analysis should be included with sufficient detail so that others can reproduce your study. When writing your materials and methods, go through your results. Carefully consider your analysis and list all key details to make your results reproducible. You then organize into subcategories by using subheadings and fill in. Everything should be written in the order of the results presented and in past tense. One of the most frequent questions that arise about the materials and methods section is how much detail should I include? When writing this section, you should answer these 3 questions. How was the study carried out? Why was the study done in a certain way? Why was more than one approach used to answer one question, if applicable? When writing about how the study was carried out, you should think about the research design, the inclusion-exclusion criteria, if you used a certain population or a certain model. Why was the study done a certain way? Think about the assays that were performed and what statistical analysis were used. And why was more than one approach used to answer a particular question? This will be applicable depending on your study. Also, try to cite your earlier work for published methods or earlier manuscripts, but provide at least some details so that the reader can follow your work without having to look up your cited manuscript. Also, if you modified a published method, describe the modifications and why they were made. Following the materials and methods section, the results section allows the reader to assess the evidence you're presenting to base your conclusions on. This should be written in a clear, concise way and be complemented with understandable tables, figures, or graphs. This is critical for the manuscript to be favorably reviewed and cited in the future. When beginning to write your results section, think about your data. How can you present it in a way that tells a story? This will help you visualize how you can divide your data into subsections and begin to draft an outline of the important points you want to present. Also, think about how can you present your data more clearly. Do you use a figure, a graph, a table? But how do you choose an effectual visual aid to present your data? You should take into consideration that visual aids should increase understanding and readability. The reader should be able to grasp the take-home message when looking at your figure or table without reading the text. All visual aids should have a title and a legend. But how do you choose whether a figure or a table is better to present your data? Consult with a biostatistician, but also consider how others have presented similar data in the literature. So once you have your subheadings, outline, graphs, and figures, a way to begin to fill in the outline under each subheading is to consider the concept, question, approach, and describe the results. Although personally, I don't like to include the interpretation of my results in this section, you can include it without discussing what the results mean. In the results section, you do want to present essential experimental evidence, but not results that don't support your conclusions. You want to share a description of the experiment and describe the rationale, but not repeat the methods in detail. You always want to present results with statistics. You also want to mention the figure, graph, or table in the order that they appear in the text. You want to provide a standalone figure, graph, or table for each of the visual aids. You want to provide a brief interpretation of the data, but not add conclusions or discuss results. Also, if you want to include supplementary data, do so if it supports your conclusions, but do not include unrelated supplementary data. Moving on to the discussion, this is the section where the importance of your results are emphasized, and where many turn to first if intrigued by the abstract. In this section, you want to address the gap in knowledge by critically analyzing your results and interpreting your findings by comparing them with what has been previously reported in the literature. When writing the discussion, you don't want to make these common mistakes. You don't want to simply recapitulate the results and not discuss the importance of the results compared to what is known. You don't want to repeat the introduction and fail to emphasize the importance of the findings. You don't want to become a review article or dissertation or over-interpret the results, which goes beyond what the data suggests by overinflating things. Also, never criticize other studies or investigators. When writing the first paragraph of your discussion section, restate the importance of the problem your study addresses. Also, state the most important finding, which should be the answer to the gap in knowledge, and also elaborate on how the results of your study advance the field. After the first paragraph, treat the discussion as a set of modular discourses, where each paragraph focuses on the major results of each figure, graph, or table. Each paragraph should compare and contrast your results with what has been previously published, stating the consistencies and inconsistencies between your data with what has been previously reported. You can speculate on why your results are consistent or inconsistent with the current model. After discussing your results, the next paragraph should state the strengths and limitations of your experimental design and your associated conclusions. In this paragraph, you can also propose subsequent studies that can make your results more applicable, which at the same time may suppress the reviewer's desire to suggest additional experiments for the current manuscript. Before or after discussing the strengths and limitations, emphasize how your study moves this field forward. Usually I incorporate this to the strengths and limitations paragraph, or use this as my last paragraph in the discussion. In this paragraph, describe specifically how do the conclusions from the study move the field forward. What can be accomplished now that couldn't have been done before? What new questions have arisen? Why is it important to answer them? And end with a strong sentence emphasizing significance. I hope this presentation helped you with some tips and general ideas on how to write and organize the subsections of a scientific manuscript. In summary, a good manuscript tells a story. Find inspiration in a manuscript you like and incorporate the features you like into your own. As you begin to write, you will develop your own style. Read the instructions for authors for the journal you select. Choose an appropriate and informative title. Try to write a concise 3 to 5 paragraph introduction. Look at your results when drafting the outline of your methods, results, and discussion section. Consult with a biostatistician or the literature when choosing how to present your data. And end your abstract introduction and discussion with a strong sentence emphasizing the importance of your findings and how it drives the field forward.